The biggest, brightest, brashest city in America. So crowded you wouldn't think there'd be room for a ghost to wander. Yet New York is said to be crawling with ghosts, and we will visit some of their favorite haunts. A 200-year-old church with a ghost that's even older. A Times Square hotel that the late F. Scott Fitzgerald still calls home. A Manhattan bistro haunted by a woman murdered by her lover. And Sleepy Hollow, where the terrifying headless horseman reappears every Halloween. These and other stories on America's most haunted places. New York can be dizzy. It can be frustrating, and by its sheer size, intimidating. But it's never dull, that's for sure. The city is a kaleidoscope of changing moods and shifting images. Its towering landmarks are recognized the world over. Its 8 million inhabitants walk faster, talk faster, maybe even think faster than anywhere else. But New York is also a city where ethnic diversity was a fact of life long before it became so in many other places. Countless minority groups are scattered across the city's 5 boroughs: Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Staten Island. Among them supposedly is a community of ghosts, going back to the time when the Dutch bought Manhattan Island for $24.
New York City offers many haunted houses, haunted places that are open to the public, where tourists can walk around and they might hear a whooshing sound. They might feel that icy chill, even in the midst of this canyons of this great city.
It's a good thing New York City's legendary ghosts don't have to pay rent. If they did, they'd probably have to move elsewhere, because New York is one of the world's most expensive cities. It was already considered that in 1835, when a wealthy merchant named Seabury Treadwell paid $18,000 for this 3-story mansion in what was then New York's finest neighborhood. The neighborhood's no longer what it used to be, and the Treadwell Mansion survives as a museum. Renamed the Old Merchant's House, it's one of the finest examples of Greek Revival architecture in the nation. The house affords visitors a glimpse into the past. Its 19th century furnishings and accessories are completely authentic. There's only one catch. The mansion is said to be haunted by a ghost named Gertrude Treadwell. Gertrude was the youngest of Seabury and Eliza Treadwell's 8 children, and the only one born in the mansion. Her father, who made his fortune in hardware, was a difficult man to please. Gertrude, like her brothers and sisters, grew up in an atmosphere of Victorian repression. She led a sheltered life until she reached maturity and got a whiff of romance.
The story told from generation to generation is that Gertrude fell madly in love with a doctor, and alas, Lewis Walton was Catholic. And the Treadwell family were strict Episcopalians, and Papa, as he was known, forbade Gertrude from marrying Lewis. And Gertrude then vowed that she would never marry.
True to her word, Gertrude never married. Instead, she retreated behind closed shutters for the rest of her life, mourning the loss of the one man she loved. Gertrude, it seems, just can't admit that she's dead. Volunteer docent Carrie Ann Beale recalls a ghostly encounter she had during a special Christmas event.
We were having a one-man show from the Dickens Museum in London, and I was sitting at the bottom of the stairs outside the parlor doors, and I heard somebody coming down from the office floor, which is now open to the public. And the stairs in this house, it's an old house, they make a very distinctive creaking noise. And I actually got up to let whoever was going to come down the stairs past me, and nobody ever came. I don't know who it could have been. Maybe it was Gertrude, maybe coming down to see the show.
Gertrude may not be the only ghost believed to be haunting the old merchant's house. Another likely candidate is her sister, Sarah. Sarah, it's rumored, gave birth to an illegitimate child. And to avoid a scandal, Seabury Treadwell had the baby killed.
When Sarah recovered,
and found out what had happened, she went mad and she committed suicide in the river. And the family story was that she had died in a carriage accident so she could be properly buried in the family plot.
The story is hearsay, and there's absolutely no evidence that Seabury was guilty of any crime other than extreme self-righteousness. Still, you have to wonder why 5 of his 7 children never married, with 3 of them, Phoebe, Julia, and Gertrude, becoming virtual recluses. And how do the people who work in the old merchant's house feel about the rumor that it's haunted?
One of the first things I heard about the ghosts in this house when I first came here was that there were these 2 pictures taken upstairs in the rear bedroom, in the same place, approximately 5 years apart. Both pictures came back with the same white stripe down the front, which is very interesting.
I have to say that as long as I've been involved with the house, which is 10 years, there have been too many stories over too long a period for there not to be something going on here. People feel things, people smell things, people are pushed. It all must add up to something.
What it adds up to, according to some people, is that the mansion is haunted by the ghost of Gertrude Treadwell and occasionally by her sister Sarah. Yet at other times, other ghosts have been detected in the house. Joe Esposito was on the 3rd floor when he heard strange noises.
I hear what sounds like 2 to 3 children, small children, running hard on the floor below me. And it's going on directly below me in the rear bedroom, which would have been Eliza Parker's bedroom, Gertrude's mother. I remember I was paralyzed for about 3 or 4 seconds that I cannot be hearing this. And then it just vanished, disappeared.
Ghost hunters believe that what Joe Esposito heard were the playful spirits of the Treadwell children revisiting their past lives. Cynics say it was a creaking floor. Gertrude's spirit supposedly lived on in the house after she died in 1933 at the ripe old age of 93. The Treadwell mansion went dark and stayed dark for 3 years. Then, in 1936, the house was rescued from obliteration by preservationists and turned into a museum. It's never been closed since, and Gertrude's ghost has become an accepted figure at the old merchant's house. She's frequently been seen and heard by museum employees and people passing by.
Someone walking by on the street stopped me and he said, "Oh, isn't this the haunted house?" And I said, well, I don't really know. What are you going to... He said, "Oh, I was walking by and I heard piano music. A piano was playing." I said to my friend, "Do you hear this piano playing?" And the guy said, "Yes."
Margaret Gardner says she knows for sure that the house was empty the night the man says he heard piano playing in the parlor. Other passers-by have described similar phenomena, some even claiming they actually saw Gertrude through the window. Such spooky occurrences are no longer unusual at the old merchant's house, and the volunteers go with the flow.
I've always been a believer in ghosts and hauntings. I've always maybe romanticized it a bit. Maybe that's another reason that I've been drawn to this house.
Most tourists visiting the old merchant's house expect to see a real ghost, but the mansion's legendary hauntings are part of its attraction. And for those who want badly to see a ghost, there's always hope.
Something's coming. We're back with Haunted Tuesdays on the Travel Channel.
Washington Square is the heart of Greenwich Village, one of New York's most popular tourist destinations. The Village, as New Yorkers call it, is a study in contrasts. Elegant old houses on quiet tree-lined streets coexist with noisy restaurants, lively night spots, and everything from seedy tattoo parlors to avant-garde art galleries. The Village has a tradition of individuality. It was the springboard for many of the 20th century's leading artists, writers, and performers, and a haven for gay men and women when the rest of America was still treating them as outcasts. Another group of outcasts is said to have found refuge in Greenwich Village, but you have to believe in ghosts to see them.
I think Greenwich Village and neighborhoods such as Soho Village attracted creative, imaginative minds over the years. Minds that were prone to understand and almost want to bring out the spirit activity. So I believe that's why those neighborhoods have become such fertile areas for ghostly activity.
West 3rd Street, off Washington Square, is considered by ghost hunters to be the most haunted street in Greenwich Village. Over the years, there have been frequent sightings on West 3rd Street of historical figures who once lived here, Aaron Burr and Edgar Allan Poe. Today, the street's reputation for being haunted rests mainly with a fireman who committed suicide in this station nearly 3/4 of a century ago. According to eyewitnesses, his ghost is still hanging around the 4-story Victorian building.
Fire patrolmen over the years have reported being touched on the shoulder or on the hand, perhaps, by an unseen, otherwise unseen energy, spirit, ghost. They've come to call the spirit at the fire patrol station Schwartz, Patrolman Schwartz, for no apparent reason other than a psychic many years ago declared his name Schwartz.
Whatever its name, the alleged ghost's presence has been an unsettling experience, even for the tough fire patrolmen working at the station. The men here belong to a special unit. Their job, to enter burning buildings alongside regular firefighters and protect personal possessions from being destroyed. After the city's World Trade Center was attacked by terrorists, these men rushed to the devastating scene. They lost one man, killed in the line of duty. Every time they answer a call, the fire patrolmen prepare for such a tragedy. Their work is always dangerous.
Some of the old-timers, guys who've been around here for like 30 and 40 years, had told me the story of the ghost. I didn't really take it seriously. I assumed they were pulling my leg, trying to, scare the young guy. So I didn't really take it seriously at all.
The fire patrol is a special unit responsible for protecting personal possessions from being destroyed. The work is dangerous. The patrolmen go into burning buildings alongside the regular firefighters, and some have been killed in the line of duty.
These are level-headed, hard-headed sometimes individuals who would scoff at the notion of ghosts. But when they're touched on the shoulder by something, or when they see a 150-pound dolly on the 4th floor exercise room just start to roll on its own, and otherwise very, very straight and plumb floor, they start to wonder a little bit.
The moving dolly has reportedly been seen or heard by practically everyone at the fire station. The younger firefighters tend to dismiss the strange occurrences as coincidence, but after working at the house for a while, they're not sure anymore. One of them, Norman McQueen, describes an encounter with the ghost that changed a confirmed skeptic into a true believer.
I was up on the 4th floor working out on the bench press, and I felt something. So I glanced up, and there's an apparition of one of the old times, the old dress uniform, just standing there. He was about 6 feet away from me. And the amount of time it took me to sit up and look directly at him, it was gone. That was the end of my workout. And I immediately left the premises when I went downstairs. I didn't want to be the brunt of nutcase jokes, so I kept it to myself.
If Norman McQueen hadn't kept it to himself, he would have soon discovered that other fire patrolmen in the unit have had similar experiences. Jimmy Gordon is a 14-year veteran at the station.
One night I was laying in a bunk, and I looked up, and I seen a man in a full dress uniform standing over me, and he just vanished on me. Then I just jumped up and started yelling and screaming. I woke everybody up, and the lights went on and stuff, and I got my chops broken pretty good for that.
Jimmy expected the other guys at the station to give him a hard time, and he took their ribbing in stride. But his experience with the ghost had unnerved him.
I couldn't really go to sleep at night, so I was talking to an older patrolman, and he said he probably just needs a little prayer for himself. So I went up to the 4th floor, and I said a little prayer for him, and he's never bothered me since.
Such stories, widely publicized in the media, have made Fire Patrol Station 2 a must for ghost hunters and chill seekers. During downtime, the firemen good-naturedly play host to small groups of tourists making the rounds of New York's haunted places. Most of the tourists know they don't stand a ghost of a chance of seeing Patrolman Schwartz. But for some, a vicarious thrill is better than no thrill.
We get a lot of out-of-town people that wants to come in and take pictures of the place and feel that they are part of the ghost story and everything else. So it's not us, I think more people want to see it and want to believe it.
The haunted fire station was popularized by author Charles Adams III in his book, New York City Ghost Stories. Adams claims that in all the years spent researching ghost stories, he never actually saw one until...
My book, New York City Ghost Stories, was being printed, and I had promised to return some photographs here to the fire station. I had completed my business in the office, and the office was empty. In fact, the entire upper floors of the building were empty. I got to this level of the spiral staircase, and in a fleeting moment, and in a breathtaking moment, I saw what I truly believed to be a pair of boots ascending this spiral staircase. I paid no mind for the first second or so, but I realized that I may have just experienced the ghost of this fire station.
Even an expert like Charles Adams can't be 100% sure that what he saw that night was Fire Patrolman Schwartz's ghost. The mind, after all, plays tricks on all of us. Still, that doesn't change Charles Adams' conviction that this ghost, and others, really exist, and that it's possible to enter their universe by conquering our irrational fear of them.
Mortals should realize that ghosts cannot hurt you. They're just energy. It's just an ambient energy that's there. We're bigger, stronger, more intellectually aware than they are. And to shy away from a place that's haunted is folly.
Fire Patrol Station 2 is proof that humans can coexist peacefully with a ghost, real or imagined. New York belonged to the Dutch for less than a century, yet they left an indelible imprint on the city with place names like Harlem, the Bronx, and Staten Island, and families like the Vanderbilts and the Roosevelts. But if you want to get a taste of what things actually looked like in colonial times, you need to venture out of the city and drive 25 miles north to a picturesque village overlooking the Hudson River. It's called Sleepy Hollow, and is best known as the setting for Washington Irving's ghost story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Irving was very correct, I think, in placing the story in Sleepy Hollow, because if you look around you, we have these deep ravines and dark, old-growth woods, and the river, which can have these storms brew up in a moment's notice. The terrain, the landscape is really ideal for that classic Halloween ghost story.
Sleepy Hollow has been painstakingly restored. Its authentic 17th and 18th century houses include a mill, a farmhouse, and the old Dutch church built in 1689. The church is still in use on religious holidays and for Sunday services during peak tourist season. The graveyard, where Washington Irving is buried, has hidden ghosts of its own.
The Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, even before the Headless Horseman, was a place known for haunting, and even the stones in the church speak of something a little more eerie and more closer to death, a natural place to draw in the spooks and spirits here.
The legend of Sleepy Hollow, with its bone-chilling images of a headless horseman, is undoubtedly the most famous ghost story in the Hudson Valley. Tall tales or not, such stories are commonly known up and down the Hudson Valley. This is Rip Van Winkle country, rich in superstition and folklore, inhabited by mythical elves, demons, and wrathful water gods.
The Native Americans had many different ghost stories and legends of their own in this area. When the Dutch colonists first came to this area in the 1600s, they also brought a very rich tradition of ghosts and goblins, picked up the Indian legends, enhanced those, created their own, and that was carried through the colonial times.
One of the scariest ghost stories circulating through the Hudson Valley in colonial times was about a decapitated soldier doomed to spend an eternity searching for his lost head. When Washington Irving heard the story years later, he embellished it and gave it a uniquely American twist. In his Legend of Sleepy Hollow, written in 1820, the Headless Horseman became a Hessian mercenary, killed during the Revolutionary War, a tormented spirit who can't seem to get his head together.
Wouldn't you be looking for your head if it was blown off by a cannonball in a nameless Revolutionary War battle? Wouldn't you still be out questing for it even past the condominiums and the highways here?
Fortunately, that isn't a choice most of us will ever have to make. But is there any red-blooded American who hasn't shuddered at the blood-curdling image of the Headless Horseman chasing his victim through the ghost-haunted woods of Sleepy Hollow?
Sleepy Hollow is indeed a hollow, and it held mist that rises up and seems to have a personality of its own. And I think what makes it feel like Halloween even on the most glorious spring day is the gloom, I guess, that hangs over it.
As if to offset Sleepy Hollow's legendary gloom, Washington Irving named his Dutch-style manor Sunnyside. He bought the house in 1835 and lived there until his death in 1859. Visitors to Sleepy Hollow seem to be as fascinated by Washington Irving as they are by his most popular book. Sunnyside is alive with memories of its owner. Much of Irving's original furniture and personal effects are on public display. The gift shop shelves are lined with current editions of Irving's enduring masterpiece. In Washington Irving's time, the Hudson Valley still retained its Dutch flavor. Irving incorporated this heritage into the legend of Sleepy Hollow, giving his colorful characters names like Ichabod Crane, Brom Bones, and Katrina Van Tassel.
Well, Washington Irving found people who at home still spoke Dutch almost 110 years after Dutch rule had ended. They rarely ventured beyond the boundaries of their village, and he said there's kind of a sleepiness, a haze that overcomes even the itinerant traveler. It puts you in a frame of mind where you believe in spirits and ghosts and bewitching.
In the legend of Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod Crane, a penniless schoolmaster, connives to win the hand in marriage of Katrina Van Tassel, the buxom daughter of a wealthy landowner. At a harvest festival, Ichabod dances the night away with Katrina, as his rival, Brom Bones, stews in the background. Confident he's won Katrina's heart, Ichabod leaves the party, smug and self-satisfied. But as he approaches Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod hears a horse's hooves behind him. He turns, and there in hot pursuit is the fearsome Headless Horseman.
The wonderful thing I think about the story is the Headless Horseman really doesn't come in until the end, very briefly, but he builds up this psychological terror, and he wraps it all together with just the right spice of evil.
The morning after, Ichabod's coat and hat are found in a ditch under the Sleepy Hollow Bridge. The luckless schoolmaster is never again seen in Sleepy Hollow. Was Ichabod's pursuer really the Headless Horseman, or Brom Bones in disguise? Like all good ghost yarns, the legend of Sleepy Hollow leaves it up to the reader to decide. No one's ever claimed that Sunnyside is haunted. The house is too cheerful for that. But from the windows, one can almost imagine seeing what Washington Irving saw when he conjured up a Headless Horseman rampaging through Sleepy Hollow. A nightmare vision that has thrilled generations of grown-ups and children on Halloween Eve. If Sleepy Hollow didn't convince you that ghosts exist, then maybe a visit to Staten Island will. A half hour by ferry from Lower Manhattan, Staten Island doesn't offer much in the way of glitzy tourist attractions. But it does have a haunted house that could give you goosebumps. Called the Conference House, it got its name from a peace conference held here 2 months after the Declaration of Independence was signed. The last-ditch attempt to end the Revolutionary War failed. The war dragged on another 5 years, and Staten Island remained a loyalist stronghold, with no one more loyal than the Conference House's owner, Christopher Billop.
There's a story that goes that he had very short fuse as far as the temper goes, and there was a disagreement with a servant girl here in the house, and being that she was a servant girl, he killed her.
The ill-fated servant's ghost reportedly roams through the empty halls of the Conference House. The house, built in 1680 by Christopher Billop's grandfather, sits on a hill facing Perth Amboy across the bay in New Jersey. During the Revolutionary War, Perth Amboy was held by the Patriots, who regarded Christopher Billop as a serious threat to their cause.
The story with him is that he was actually kidnapped twice by Americans who were across the way in New Jersey. Supposedly, there was a servant girl here who was spying for the Americans, and supposedly she was signaling them from the house when he was on the property. A small group of Patriots came across at the middle of the night and took him across to jail in New Jersey. They did prisoner exchanges back then, and when he was released, he found out somehow that she might have been a spy.
Convinced that the girl had betrayed him, Billop became obsessed with revenge. He waited for the right moment and then struck. The servant girl's death was swift and brutal. Billup reputedly buried the body in the cellar and covered it up. For a century and a half, there was hardly a mention of a ghost in the conference house. Since that time, tourists and workers have reported feeling a ghostly presence inside the conference house. Madeline Bertolini, president of the Conference House Association, didn't believe in ghosts until she and two other women were confronted by a powerful force they couldn't explain.
We were demonstrating weaving on Sundays, and we set up this loom, which we had in the children's bedroom. It was a very large loom and very temperamental, and it took 3 of us to set it up. And we left, came back the next week, and everything was messed up. The gate, however, to the room was locked. So I called the caretaker right away, and he said he had not been in that room. And he even said, look, the furniture is dusty, feel it, look it, I haven't been in here.
Madeline Bertolini and her friends tidied up the room and left. The next week, the same thing happened. Madeline remembers thinking that if the room gets messed up again, she'll start believing that it was caused by the ghost. Sure enough, when she walked into the bedroom for the 3rd time, it was a complete shambles. Madeline decided to confront the ghost.
I stood in the middle of the room and spoke to this presence or the spirit and told her that we weren't there to harm anything, and would she please let it be. The next week, everything was fine. And every time I came to the house after that, I always, to this day, say hi and talk to her and let her know what's going on.
Like most ghost witnesses, Madeline Bertolini kept the story to herself and her 2 friends. No point in anyone laughing at you. But when Madeline's husband, a confirmed skeptic, told her he felt a ghostly chill whenever he climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, she knew she had nothing to hide. During last year's Christmas celebration, Madeline again saw something she could hardly believe. She showed us what happened.
Another board member was in the kitchen preparing to serve with hot mulled cider to our guests outside, and she was putting styrofoam cups together, and one kept falling over. And after about the 5th time, she slapped it down, and the cup spun in her hand. That made a believer out of her, too.
Whether you're a believer or non-believer, you at least have to acknowledge that events at the conference house suggest the presence of a phantom prankster. Madeline Bertolini is certain it's the servant girl's ghost. And who are we to say she's wrong? The last place you'd expect to find a ghost is on Liberty Island in New York Harbor, where the Statue of Liberty has stood since 1886. A gift from the people of France, the statue was designed by sculptor Frederick Bartoli, who used his mother's face as a model, and constructed by Gustave Eiffel of Eiffel Tower fame. The bronze cast statue, often called Miss Liberty, towers 300 feet above the harbor. In her shadow, it said, walks the ghost of a pirate who sailed with the notorious Captain Kidd. Kidd lived in New York in the late 17th century and reportedly buried his treasure on this island. In accordance with pirate custom, a crew member was buried alive to guard it. It was this legend, a century and a half later, that spurred 2 American soldiers into searching for the treasure.
As people ascend to the Statue of Liberty, they at one point stand on the parapets of what was Fort Wood, which is now the pedestal, actually, of the Statue of Liberty. It was about 1825 when Sergeant Gibbs, a private carpenter, had heard a rumor that pirate gold was buried somewhere on that island.
The soldier got the story from a Manhattan psychic who told them that a tree branch used as a divining rod would lead them to the buried treasure. On the moonlit night in 1825, Gibbs and Carpenter sneaked out of the fort and probed the shallow sands for signs of the treasure.
All of a sudden, the rod plunged to the ground, indicating that's where the gold was buried. They started digging for the gold. As they dug a couple of shovelfuls of dirt out, all of a sudden, out of the soil rose the ghost of a pirate.
Gibbs and Carpenter ran screaming into the fort. When interrogated, they swore they had seen a ghost, and as far as we know, they never recanted their story.
And the ghost of that pirate is said to still dwell here on Bedloe's Island, now Liberty Island, and those who walk beneath Lady Liberty herself might just experience that ghost. Who knows?
The Statue of Liberty attracts more than 5 million tourists a year. What if one of them did encounter a ghost on Liberty Island? Would it scare him or her off?
But I know there has to be a ghost since they filmed the Ghostbusters movie here.
I would like to come and spend the night here if it was haunted and actually see a ghost.
If I knew there was a ghost on Liberty Island, I would have come for sure.
Wouldn't have scared me away.
Nah.
Now that I know there's a ghost here, I'll probably walk around a little bit and then catch next boat back.
I think here at the Statue of Liberty, when people will, marvel in the beauty of the statue and the meaning of it, they should also marvel in what was here before that statue. Just sit down, stop long enough, and just listen. And maybe we'll hear that whoosh sound of ghosts passing in front of them or just over their shoulder. You never know.
A short boat ride from Liberty Island to Lower Manhattan will leave you enough time to visit one of the island's oldest churches. St. Mark's in the Bowery was built in 1799. Its doors have been open to worshipers and the needy ever since. St. Mark's is also a center for the performing arts, with local theater groups and live concerts. But the church has another claim to fame. It's reputedly haunted by the ghost of New York's last Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant. Better known as Peg-Leg Pete, Stuyvesant's ghost has been sighted in St. Mark's churchyard so many times, even the clergy keeps an open mind.
St. Mark's is the burial place of Peter Stuyvesant, in history commonly called by some Peg-Leg Pete, because he indeed had a peg leg, a wooden leg. The story has circulated for many years at St. Mark's that people working at St. Mark's, worshiping at St. Mark's, or just walking past St. Mark's have occasionally heard a rather distinctive sound of a footstep and a thump, indicating a peg-legged ghost.
I think very often God attempts to communicate to us not just through our minds or through our prayer or through our interactions with others, but also perhaps in sightings and visions and experiences that we might call ghostly.
Biblically, there is not much of a basis for ghosts or spirits. And personally, I have never seen one, and I'm a skeptic. But I know people who swear that they have.
Peter Stuyvesant became governor of New Amsterdam in 1646. He had lost a leg in battle and ruled with an iron fist, earning him the hatred of the Dutch colonists. When a British fleet showed up in 1664, the colonists forced the old tyrant to surrender without a fight, just to get even with him. New Amsterdam became New York, and ex-governor Stuyvesant became a gentleman farmer. He owned a large parcel of land known as the Bowery, the Dutch word for farm. When Stuyvesant died in 1672, he was buried in an underground crypt near the family chapel. He lay quietly in his coffin for more than 100 years. Then, St. Mark's was built around his burial site, and Peg-Leg Pete came up for air. He's been hanging out in the churchyard ever since.
As far as St. Mark's itself is concerned, Peter Stuyvesant's influence rests in the fact that he established his Bowery farm here and built a chapel and began this as a sacred site for his family's burial. Whether that produced some kind of sighting or not, it's hard to say.
And having all these people buried here is kind of logical that people will have a feeling of their presence in some way. And this is not necessarily supernatural. It can be a psychological phenomenon, simply.
A former administrator at St. Mark's discounts Father Torres' theory that the church sightings may be purely psychological. Pat Thompson says she's both seen and heard Peg-Leg Pete, and to her, he's about as real as a ghost gets.
It was very late one night. I was the only person in the building working, and I was getting ready to leave the church, and as I was walking from the entrance to the parish hall toward the front, I heard something in the background, a thumping noise, and I also felt the presence of someone behind me. And I turned my head, and I saw Peter Stuyvesant following me. He didn't make any noise or say anything, and he didn't look all that menacing, but he was just walking very slowly behind me and watching me very carefully to see what I was doing and where I was going.
Pat Thompson admits that at first she was unnerved by the encounter and sped up to get away from the ghost. But her curiosity got the best of her. She looked back over her shoulder, and sure enough, the ghost was still there.
But he was sort of just had his head kind of tilted and nodding his head and walking slowly as if to say, okay, good night, thank you, have a good night, I'll see you next week. He looked just like what I would imagine Peter Stuyvesant looked like in that time. He was very much formed. He looked like a human being.
Pat Thompson's story is dismissed by skeptics as fabrication or a figment of her imagination. But Pat is unwavering and seemingly sincere in her insistence that Peter Stuyvesant's ghost reached out to her. In a city as rich and as varied as New York, it's inevitable that new ghosts are always being added to the roster. In 1995, the New Amsterdam Theater on 42nd Street was renovated. A number of construction workers claimed they saw the ghost of a 1920s showgirl wandering aimlessly through the theater. A mile and a half uptown from the New Amsterdam, on the Upper West Side, is one of Manhattan's oldest, most exclusive apartment buildings, the Dakota. The Dakota was said to be haunted after Beatle John Lennon was murdered at the front entrance by a crazed fan in 1980. While these relative newcomers have yet to prove their staying power, New York's established ghosts have been holding their own for quite a while. One of them, Elma Sands, has to be the best-fed ghost in New York City. Elma resides in a French restaurant on Spring Street in Manhattan's trendy Soho district. The Manhattan Bistro's been here for less than 20 years. The ghost, supposedly for more than 200. She's been said to wander unseen through the restaurant, and sometimes, if you stretch your imagination, you can catch a glimpse of her in the doorway. But she supposedly spends most of her time in the basement, near a well that was her crypt for over 2 centuries.
When I was a kid, I used to be very scared to go downstairs. The well at that time was covered up, so my father would point out to me that behind that wall is where Elma Sands was killed and pushed in the well.
It was on this site in 1799 that Elma was brutally murdered. Soho at that time was a swamp outside the city limits. Its wells supplied fresh drinking water to New York. It was in one of these wells that Elma Sands ended up.
A prominent young man in Manhattan had gotten Elma Sands pregnant, and he thought the best way to solve the problem was to do away with her. So he killed her and put her in the well. There's plenty of clear evidence that he was guilty. However, he was represented by Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. And they got him off completely scot-free. It was the O.J. Simpson trial of the late 1700s.
After the sensational trial ended, Elma's body was dug up and given a proper burial. But it was rumored that her ghost remained interred in the well. The well was walled up when the building that houses the Manhattan Bistro was constructed in 1817. It remained enclosed until the 1980s, when the bistro's basement was renovated. The well was unearthed, and Elma's ghost unleashed. She's been haunting the Manhattan Bistro ever since, according to General Manager Maria de Grossa.
I was standing by the podium. The other manager, Alex, was behind the bar, and no one was standing anywhere near where the wine is stored, and the bottles just flew off the shelf onto the floor.
Tommy King works as a waiter at the Manhattan Bistro. When he first came here in 1999, Tommy didn't have a clue that there was a ghost here. But it didn't take long for him to find out.
I was sitting in a chair very much like this one, and had my legs crossed, and all of a sudden the chair, it was as if someone had taken it from behind and pulled it out from under me, and I went flying forward. It was very weird, but it wasn't scary or anything of that sort. It was actually kind of a comforting thing. It was almost as if someone was kind of playing with me. I think that Elma feels closest to Maria. Every time she tries to leave, Elma does something to prevent her from leaving. A couple weeks ago, the lights in the whole restaurant went out. All the switches at one time had been lowered. And then Maria went on and turned them on, and she was going to leave, and then the whole computer system went down.
Coincidence? Faulty wiring. Go argue with the management staff at the Manhattan Bistro. They'll tell you that the restaurant is haunted and that even if you don't see her, Elma's ghost is always around. Alex Marafiati was doing the books one night when he was startled by a sound next door.
All of a sudden I heard somebody lifting up the phone in the owner's office at least 3 times. I knew there was nobody there because the door is locked, the security alarm was on at that time. And I said, you can stay there and play all you want, but just don't come to this side of the room.
The Manhattan Bistro doesn't try to capitalize on its resident ghost. There's never a mention made of Elma in the restaurant's publicity. It's probably a good idea. Most people will laugh it off anyway. We were pretty skeptical ourselves when we went to film in the restaurant. Less so when we left. We had witnessed something that made us think that maybe, just maybe, Elma's ghost might possibly exist.
A moment ago, before we started recording, this cement just came flying at us. It's from the ceiling. It didn't just fall, it actually came darting towards us, which I think was Elma's way of letting us know, that she's here.
A ghost tour of New York wouldn't be complete without a brief stopover at the Algonquin Hotel. Located on 44th Street, just east of Times Square, the Algonquin is a quiet, old-fashioned hotel, haunted, literally as well as figuratively, by memories of some of America's brightest literary and theatrical talents. During the 1920s, the Algonquin Hotel played host to freewheeling humorists, playwrights, actors, and musicians who lunched every day in the dining room and became known as the Algonquin Round Table, even though the table they ate at was rectangular. They were a cantankerous, argumentative bunch whose impact on 20th century literature and the Broadway theater is legendary. In addition to regulars like humorist Dorothy Parker, playwright George S. Kaufman, and drama critic Alexander Woollcott, the Round Table would sometimes invite outsiders into their circle.
Papa Marx was part of this group. I mean, here was a man that I knew as a kid, never said a word on film, yet he had to be a literary man to be part of this group, with the banter back and forth.
Another favorite guest of the Round Table was F. Scott Fitzgerald, author of The Great Gatsby, the classic novel that helped define the Roaring Twenties. Fitzgerald, a chronic alcoholic, and Dorothy Parker, who could hold her own, would often meet for drinks at the Algonquin and talk for hours. Fitzgerald and Parker must have enjoyed each other's company and the hotel, because their ghosts have reportedly been seen on a number of occasions, chatting away in the lobby. Considering the amount of creative and intellectual energy expended here over the years, it's only natural that the Algonquin Hotel would be haunted, according to the author of New York City Ghost Stories, Charles Adams III.
Within the walls of the Algonquin is so much energy pent up that on New Year's Eve, the employees actually go through the Algonquin with pots and pans and noisemakers to have some fun, but also, in tradition, to kind of clean the place out of any ambient energies or ghosts that may be there. And it may be fun, but underlying all that fun is a little bit of, maybe it'll work.
If ghosts really do exist in the Algonquin Hotel, it isn't likely that they'd be scared off by the staff's noisemakers. After all, New York's ghosts, like everyone else, are bombarded all day long by the noise and excitement of a city that rarely stops to catch its breath. You can always find somewhere to go, someplace to see. No wonder they call New York the city that never sleeps.
Hi, Tracy Gallagher for the Travel Channel. I'm here at SpookyHouse.com, where scaring you silly is serious business. From the zombie shuffle to blood-curdling screams. These guys are frighteningly good. And if you're looking for more spine-tingling thrills, from mansions of mystery to haunted hotels, Haunted Travels Week starts Monday night at 8, only on the Travel Channel.